On the night of June 13, 2026, in East Rutherford, New Jersey, a Brazilian forward scored a goal that lit up the stadium. 20 minutes later, the same player stood in a tunnel and refused to speak. Not out of anger, not out of disrespect, but because, in his words, he would rather pay a fine than hand over a moment that belonged to his team. That single refusal would echo far beyond one match. Is something shifting in how the players, teams, and federations of the world relate to the people running their sport's biggest stage? To understand that question, you have to understand the scale of what's happening in 2026. Football's governing body expanded this tournament from 32 teams to 48, spreading matches across 3 host nations: the United States, Mexico, and Canada. It was sold as the most inclusive competition in the sport's history. More nations, more dreams, more opportunity. But inclusion at this scale comes with a cost that doesn't always show up in the highlight reels. Longer flights, tighter turnarounds, and logistics that strain even the wealthiest federations. The first crack appeared with Vinícius Júnior. After Brazil's draw with Morocco, a broadcaster approached him for the mandatory halftime interview. He declined. When told he'd be fined, he answered plainly, they would pay it, but they would not give the interview. The clip spread within hours. Reactions split cleanly down the middle. Why does a 20-second refusal matter in a tournament with 48 teams and dozens of storylines? Because it touches something larger than one player's mood. Halftime is recovery time. Tactical instructions, hydration, treatment for knocks picked up in the first half. Critics argue that inserting a media obligation into that window prioritizes broadcast revenue over the physical needs of the athletes performing in extreme heat across unfamiliar climates. Observers have noted that several players across different squads have echoed similar frustrations, even if none went as far as Vinicius did on camera. But this is where the story changes. The conversation didn't stay confined to one Brazilian star. On the pitch in Atlanta, Cape Verde, a nation with one of the smallest populations ever to qualify for football's biggest stage, held reigning European champion Spain to a goalless draw. Spain managed 27 shots. Cape Verde managed 6. The scoreline read 0-0, but the subtext read differently. A debutante nation, with a fraction of the resources and travel budget of its opponent, matching elite opposition despite a tournament structure that some say disproportionately burdens smaller federations with longer trips and shorter rest. That alone would be significant. Yet the situation goes further when you look at Iran's experience in this competition. Iran's federation has spent the tournament managing a situation far more complicated than fixtures and form. The team relocated its training base from Arizona to Tijuana, Mexico, after visa complications and political tensions surrounding the tournament's host country. According to reports, Iranian players have been required to enter the United States within 24 hours of a match and depart immediately afterward, with the head coach describing the arrangement as among the most restrictive faced by any team in the competition. Sections of the federation's own staff were reportedly denied entry visas altogether, and supporters' ticket allocations were affected as well. Tournament organizers have acknowledged the difficulties exist, even as the underlying causes sit largely outside football's control. Here is why this matters beyond Iran alone. When travel, visas, and access become as newsworthy as the football itself, the tournament's organizers face a wider question about how prepared a 48-team, 3-country format truly is for the political and logistical realities of hosting nations from every continent. The expanded competition was designed to bring the world together. For some teams, the early rounds have instead highlighted just how unevenly the practical burden of the world's game is distributed. The larger question is whether these are isolated incidents or symptoms of a structural strain. Football's governing institution maintains that the expanded format increases global representation and gives more nations a genuine opportunity to compete on the sport's biggest stage, a goal few would argue against in principle. The institution has pointed to record qualification numbers and the historic appearances of debut nations like Cape Verde as evidence the expansion is working as intended. Yet supporters, players, and some federations suggest the growth has outpaced the planning required to support it. The contrast has raised questions about whether commercial and developmental ambitions have been matched by equal attention to player recovery time, equitable travel conditions, and consistent treatment of every competing nation, regardless of political relationships between host and visiting countries. It would be easy to frame this as players and smaller nations against the institution running the show. The bigger picture resists that simplicity. Most teams at this World Cup have voiced no complaints at all. Many federations have praised the organization, the stadiums, and the experience their fans have had across 3 countries. The issues raised by Vinicius, by Iran's federation, and by the broader travel conversation surrounding teams like Cape Verde are real, but they exist alongside a tournament that has, by most measures, delivered on its football. Counterpoints matter here. A 48-team format inevitably surfaces more friction simply because more teams, more travel, and more stakeholders are involved than ever before. Growth without any friction may not be realistic for a competition of this size. What seems clear is that the 2026 World Cup has entered a phase where different voices, a global superstar, a debutante underdog, a federation navigating geopolitics, are each in their own way asking the same underlying question. As the tournament grows larger, who is the growth really designed to serve, and at what cost to the people playing the games? The conclusion isn't a verdict, it's an invitation to watch how football's governing body responds in the rounds still to come, whether through policy adjustments, public statements, or simply silence. Tournaments are remembered for their goals and their champions, but they are also remembered for the moments when the system itself was tested. So here's the question worth sitting with. When a tournament expands to include more of the world, does it have a responsibility to adapt its structure to match? Or is some friction simply the price of bringing 48 nations to one stage? Let us know what you think in the comments below.